And we are live. Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to a brand new movie review. I'm Chris Garner, joined today with Tom Woods to give our review, or should I say, my review. This is going to be one of those similar movie reviews where one of us has seen it and one of us will be asking us questions on the other one. Basically, me and George were meant to be on this one tonight, but there was this discrepancy of when George could go and see it, and he probably won't be able to get to see it until the latter part of next week, and we really wanted to get a review out for this one, so you'll have to put up with us, I'm afraid. So this will be a review on Murder on the Orient Express, which is Kevin... I was going to... Oh, wow, no, that was going to go into all of the territory. We were talking about another actor there. No, thank Christ that isn't the case. We are talking about Kenneth Branagh's... Wow, that dodged a bullet with that one. 2017 adaptation of the Agatha Christie novel from 1934. Wow. Pulling it back from that. Can I just like shut this off and just like start the whole thing again? No,
it's staying.
We're good. Okay. So this is actually the fourth adaptation of the novel. There was a 1974 film. There was a 2001 TV film. There was a 2010 episode with David Suchet, I believe, and then we have this one now. My history on Murder on the Orient Express. So I've never read the novel. I'm going to open with that right now. But I did see the original movie, the 1974 one, when I was really young. Well over 10 years ago when I watched it. And I couldn't remember it verbatim, but I could remember the ending and some of the plot points along the way. This review will begin spoiler-free, so don't worry about me giving anything away regarding the plot that's going to ruin it for you. We might do a spoiler section towards the end, but for the most part, I want to keep this review as spoiler-free as possible. So a brief synopsis for anyone who doesn't know. A lavish train ride unfolds into a stylish and suspenseful mystery from the novel of Agatha Christie. Murder on the Orient Express tells of 13 stranded strangers and one man's race to solve the puzzle before the murderer strikes again. It's a really sort of like tight-knit story. It's a really good atmosphere, and I've been looking forward to this movie, kind of, although the trailers came out, and I will say the trailers made this movie out to look like a completely different movie from what it was, which I was actually grateful for. Now, you've watched one of the trailers, so you have some frame of reference because you weren't really knowledgeable about the Agatha Christie novel or this Poirot, or I mean, Express in general.
I mean, I know the Poirot character, and I know the sort of some of the novels Agatha Christie wrote about him, or the character. But I haven't read Murder on the Orient Express. I haven't seen the 1974. Yeah, 1974 film, or the latest one. So, yeah, my frame of reference for this isn't one of isn't particularly good. But you know, I'll try my best to ask you the important questions about mustaches.
And I mean, if we've got any UK viewers out there, you know that the whole Agatha Christie, whether it be Hercule Poirot, whether it be Miss Marple, they're on TV pretty much all the time, or at least they were for a time. You couldn't go a day without there being some kind of omnibus or marathon of a bunch of episodes of them. These were like on every single day. So it's a character that I've always kind of grew up knowing. And then, as I said, I did watch that 74 film. One of my concerns from the trailer before going into this one was that this was going to be Murder on the Orient Express for a hip 2017 crowd. And from the trailer anyway, that's what I got. There's this blue neon look to it that continues throughout the film. Feels very much like Suicide Squad in that regard in terms of the marketing. You've got these, or Atomic Blonde, for example. If you look at the poster, for example, you've got the blue neon of the font, which continues into the film. But even the poster as well, it looks very stylized. Lots of blue neons on there. And even the trailer as well had that moment where, did you watch the first trailer that came out? Or two?
Yeah.
You've got that POV shot of Poirot walking down the train corridor, and then it's coming up with the professions and who everyone is, essentially, because it's a huge ensemble cast in this film. And I was worried that they were going to bring that style into the film, and it really wouldn't mesh. You've also have the Imagine Dragons song in the trailer, which really didn't fit, and pretty much all the comments I read in the video were saying that they hope to God that song isn't in the movie. It's not. And it's very much sort of the time, which I liked about it, and it's not too over stylized. It is in some respects, but I'll get into that later on. So do you have a question at all?
Yes,
Fire at me. Okay.
I do. So, I want to know how, because you've got such a big ensemble, are they at all? Does it appear like they're all fighting for screen time, or are they? Or does it feel essentially? Does it feel like they're all fighting to have the most screen time? Because you have got some really big name actors in there. I mean, Johnny Depp, Judi Dench, obviously Kenneth Branagh will be the central focus of it, so he's playing Poirot. But the rest of the cast, does it feel like they're trying to sort of outdo each other?
No, not at all. Some definitely do get more recognition than other characters, but I think that's just pertaining to the plot. All of them do have a vital role to play in the film. And I think the star power they had behind it, I was worried that, like when Josh Gad was cast, for example, and I don't hate Josh Gad, but I'm less fond of him, I will say. Also, that goes for Daisy Ridley as well. So I was concerned when they were cast. But honestly, no one really turns in a bad performance in this film. I was hoping that
even Daisy Ridley,
she's fine. She's kind of more or less exactly the same. There's not much range from what you see from her in Star Wars. There's some characters, for example, like Derek Jacobi or certainly Willem Dafoe, that maybe I would have liked to have seen in the film more. Some are definitely brought to the forefront, but there's never that sense where anyone's fighting for screen time. It all feels very naturalistic to the narrative and the plot of the movie. It's very difficult to talk about when I can't go into the actual plot of the film. I will say, though, Kenneth Branagh. Kenneth Branagh is one of my favorite actors, and I think that mostly goes to my Gilderoy Lockhart bias from the Harry Potter franchise. He is just an absolute delight. I've really liked his films that he's directed as well. Recently, I don't know if his last film was Thor or if he did one after that. I can't remember. But he's keeping some of his collaborations before. For example, the guy who composed the music, Patrick Doyle, he's worked with since like the late 80s, and he's continued to work with him. I'll get onto the music later on. But Kenneth Branagh is great as Poirot. At this stage, I don't know whether I could say he's my favorite, because I really do like David Suchet, and I actually really like Albert Finney's performance of the character from the 1974 film. This is very different, and it feels a little bit more accessible, I would say, to a modern audience. Towards the beginning of the film, I was a bit concerned, though, because Poirot is... I mean, there's so many detective characters out there in fictional history, like Sherlock Holmes probably being arguably the main one. And we've had loads of adaptations of that character too. And I was concerned with this one at the beginning of this film, because it did seem like they were chasing after that Sherlock mentality, whether that be the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock or the Robert Downey. It was very quirky, comedic, more action-packed. Like, he can hold his own in a fight. He can set up situations way far in advance to the realm of, like ridiculous standards. Like, he's orchestrated everything perfectly. He can look at the minute detail on someone's clothes and know their entire backstory. And it was straying into that in like the first 10 to 15 minutes. And I was worried, because I did not want them to go that angle with Poirot. But as soon as the character gets onto the Orient Express and it snaps back into that confined space, just like the really tight story, and it doesn't take as many liberties with the source material, then it really worked for me, and I could relax, and I had a really good time with it and his performance.
I mean, you spoke about the claustrophobic, sort of when they get on the train, the claustrophobic nature of it. But having looked into it, it was shot on what, 75?
It was 75 or 70 mil. Yeah,
75 mil. So how does that play, or how does it feel when you're in those confined spaces on the train? How does it look? I mean, obviously I assume the establishing shots and the shots outside the train are look very nice in 70 or 75 mil. But how does it look when you're inside, when you're in a confined space?
I honestly didn't have a problem with it. Really, you kind of get three locations, not counting the beginning or the end of the film. You get three locations. You get the main sort of lobby of the train, like the big expansive area, the seating area, the dining area where everyone can sit. You've got the cabins, and then you've got all the outside of the train stuff. In all honesty, I think it looked fine. The cinematography was really nice. They do some interesting camera shots where I mean, essentially, most of these Poirot or Agatha Christie novels is a lot of people sat down and Poirot talking at them as he's working out the case. And
Yeah.
that can be really boring. It's like notorious for any kind of exposition or anything like that. The least interesting way of shooting it is just have a camera going from one character to the other or just stationary. But they do some interesting things. So the camera will track past like a pane of glass, and it'll be refracted and reflected, so you'll get sort of like a double image of the person he's talking to, which I really liked. There's another shot where the camera will trace all the way outside the entire train, so you get a sense of geography, where all the characters are in relation to each other in the cabin. So it does change it up. It's not sort of like fixed inside the train the entire time, and even when it is, it's absolutely fine and it looks great. Whether it needed to be shot on 70mm, because I mean, for example, Hateful Eight, Tarantino's last movie,
Yeah.
that basically took place in a cabin the entire movie, and the medium was kind of wasted, I found, with that film. My problem with this film, if I'm going to stylistically or anything like that, the stuff I didn't like was the really, really broad use of CGI and green screen outside of the train.
Oh, really?
It
So
really
they have...
didn't. Oh, yeah. And I think that when they do that, it was a ploy to make it more action-packed and inject a bit of energy into it. Because if you watch the original 74 film, and although I've never read the novel, I'm guessing it's from that, it's very sort of, you know, A to B to C. It's get Poirot on the train, murder happens, he discovers it, and then he, you know, tells you who the killer is at the end. It's very, very simple. Whereas with 2017 and with an audience, and this is catering to a mass audience, probably some people have never even heard of Murder on the Orient Express before. They've got to inject it with that 2017 movie magic. And that was the stuff that I really didn't like. Not a massive spoiler, but before the murder takes place, or it might be just after, actually, the train is grounded, essentially, which plays in that sense of isolation, and he's there to do a job and to work out who the killer is. In the original film, they just say that there's been a snowdrift, they're snowbound, and they can't get through on the track with the train, so it has to stay there. In this movie, there's like this big, broad bird's eye view sweeping shot over a mountain, and there's a lightning storm, and lightning strikes a mountain, and there's an avalanche, and it cascades down in front of the train and derails it, and it's all really over the top and very CGI. Even like the shots of the train, most of the shots of the train, in fact, even if the camera is just outside tracking past it, even if you've just got Kenneth Branagh walking along the top of the train, it all feels very fake, and it doesn't look very realistic and doesn't mesh with that really sort of like old 30s dress style. And when you get into the cabin and you have these great costumes and beautiful sets,
yeah,
sticks out like a sore thumb. And
okay.
like the original, I watched the original 70s film straight after I went to see this one, just so I had a bit of frame of comparison. And for the most part, they're more or less exactly the same, with opposed to the beginnings of the film and sort of the overall, like, as I said, like the action tone that's injected into this one a little bit more. But yeah, no, so they had a real train in the 70s one. Obviously they didn't have the visual effects, but it just feels a lot more real. And I don't know why they couldn't have just built a real train. And I'm sure they did for some stationary shots, but it does feel very artificial in some parts of the film.
Ah, okay. I've another question. So the film, does it take itself too seriously at times, or for the most part is it fun? Fun not being the right word.
No, I get what you mean.
But sort of, does it become overly serious that it doesn't have any levity in it?
I would say the second act of the film definitely does have that, but again, that's kind of the tone of what Agatha Christie is. Yes, it does have humor in some incarnations, probably more so the David Suchet one. The start of the film itself is very funny and very comedic, and it sort of like eases you into this new take on the Poirot character and the world and his kind of shtick. Once you get onto the train, though, it does seem to be a bit more mature, and it's not really dry or anything like that where you're bored, because you are engaged with a mystery. You do, if you're not familiar with the story, you do want to know who did it. You are trying to work it out as Poirot is working it out and finding evidence and clues and things like that. I don't think something like that inherently would benefit from being comedic, because like with Kenneth Branagh's approach to the character, his direction, he does bring a lot of substance to the character of Poirot, especially towards the end of the film, where Poirot is a man of principle and just like a meticulous nature and method. And there's a lot of things that happen in this film that do make him question his own beliefs in the justice system and things like that. So when you get into stuff like that, it's not really comedic. There are a few fun little quirks with Poirot. For example, it's almost like a character in itself is his moustache. I wish to shake the guy's hand, whoever invented the design for this moustache for the film. It's almost like two. It's like one conventional one and then one slightly bigger one that like comes off to the side as well. There's moments like that where he's got one of those little material covers over his moustache, or he's reading Dickens and he's giggling like a little kid. Funny things like that that are really kind of quirky to the character that I liked. But for the most part, especially Act 2, it does take itself seriously, but not in a bad way. I appreciated that it did that, because I think if it did go all out comedic and like action packed, it would have been a film that I definitely wouldn't have liked.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, I was going to ask you about the mustache, and if it was any good, because it did look rather.
It's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous, but it's fine.
But it doesn't. So it doesn't draw you out of the film at all, or you get used to it to a certain degree.
You get used to it. I mean, I got used to it after the first scene. Really, there's that one scene, as I said, on the train where like someone knocks on the door and wakes him up, and he's in like his pajamas, and he wakes up and he's got this like big material strap to protect his mustache. Like that's about as far as they go with it. After that, you just kind of accept it. Really, it's completely ridiculous and ludicrous, but there is that eccentricity to the character of Poirot anyway. So.
Okay. So the cast is fine. How is the
cast is really good.
How is the music? Is there certain tracks that are really stand out, and does the composer do a good job of sort of bringing you the sort of isolation?
For the most part of the film, I mean, the music's fantastic. Patrick Doyle does the soundtrack, and I love Patrick Doyle. I love what he did in Goblet of Fire, and there's a lot of similar elements to that from that Harry Potter film in this one. He also worked with Kenneth Branagh on many of his other films, most recently Thor, which I really liked the soundtrack for. Not Thor Ragnarok or The Dark World, it was the original Thor, which had a theme for the character and had compelling moments in the soundtrack, which is sadly lost in the other two films that came out. So I like to see that Kenneth Branagh was working with this guy again. Towards the end of the film, there's one track on the soundtrack. I believe it's called Justice. I'm not familiar with all the track names just yet. I'm going to have to find that. And there's also a credits song that's sung by one of the actors in the film, which is a really nice song, beautiful melody. And I paid attention to it in the film, and I wanted to listen to it immediately as I got back. So that's a sign of a good track. And I have been listening to some of the other tracks since I've got back, and it's a great soundtrack. It really works for the film. Yeah, it's a beautiful like piano piece and strings towards the end, and it's something that I wouldn't really associate with Murder on the Orient Express. And if you look at the soundtrack to the 70s movie, now granted it's fairly dated at this point, and most soundtracks from that time period do have a very different style for the scale that you can have for music nowadays. And that fit like the typical sort of like almost TV like murder mystery week in week out kind of music. This one was grandiose and big and fit a cinematic film of 2017 standards. I really liked the music. I'm definitely going to be listening to it more. I probably can't go into that ending track of who sings it, because that might give away something pertaining to the ending. Right. So, but no, I really enjoyed it. It's a great soundtrack.
What, just sort of moving on. I mean, I know I'm like pelting questions at you that don't really have sort of don't really connect to each other. But they're just the things that just come out of my head immediately. So I'm interested to know, in terms of direction. I mean, because Kenneth Branagh is a really good director, but does he have to rein in some of the stars on the project, or does he? Do they try to attempt to do things that you would kind of think were overly silly? And does he have to sort of rein them in, or I don't know, like?
Do you mean like the actual actors on set, or do you mean in terms of the characters in the film?
Like the actual actors.
I haven't seen many of the behind the scenes stuff, in all honesty, of this film, but I think that there's no really egos on set that you can tell from the film. Nothing like that shines through in the film.
Yeah.
I'm guessing everyone got on with each other on the set. They might not have, but you don't get that impression in the film. There's not many moments. Oh God, this is so difficult to not go into the plot of it. He mostly questions people one-on-one throughout the film. You do get moments where they're all sat together in a room, but it's all very much like, oh, I didn't do it. They might have done it. And that's really it. So you do get these unique one-on-one moments with Kenneth Branagh with more or less each of the cast. And as I said, this is a huge ensemble cast. With most of these murder mystery things, I have to watch them a bunch of times to process everything and everyone's motive and past and everything like that, because names are thrown around. You don't get many moments where there's, you get to know their name and it's repeated many times, so it becomes cemented. They might get mentioned once, and then 2 hours in, they're mentioning character after character after character, and it can get a little bit much. But I think in this one, more so than the other films, everyone had a unique personality, and I think the star power definitely helped this one as well. Not to say that the cast from the 70s one was bad at all, because you had the likes of Anthony Perkins from Psycho in that film. You had Sean Connery. You did have big names in that film. But this one, by comparison, I mean, even from the poster and stuff, you don't come out of this film calling them by their characters' names. It's you go, that's Daisy Ridley, that's Penelope Cruz, that's Dame Judi Dench. So there is that. But it didn't seem like there was any egos on set or anything like that. Everyone's pretty much, sensible in the roles that they're casting.
Okay. And I mean, how does it feel? Does he take on the job as sort of, because I know he directed it as well, didn't he? Mm-hmm. So is it does it feel like he's taken on too big of a job in directing it and starring in it as well, or does he do a good job of both?
I think the guy does a great job of both. I mean, Kenneth Branagh's been directing for years. He did Hamlet, which is one of the most impressive films I've ever seen in terms of scale and staging and production design. He knows his way around the film. I don't envy him that task at all. Any actor that acts and also directs the film, whether it be Mel Gibson with Braveheart or whichever other film you can think of, it can't be any easy task. But he knows what he's doing, and as he's like an actor of the stage and screen, you can tell that he probably brought that element into it a lot more. I mean, you've got Judi Dench there, you've got Derek Jacobi, who are masters of the stage as well as the screen. So I think he probably had that. As an actor, he was able to have that rapport with all the other actors in the film to get the best performance out of them. And I genuinely think he did. I mean, this movie made me like Josh Gad. That's no tall order. But it happened, and it was a very different. When I saw Josh Gad in the cast, I was thinking, "Oh God, this is going to be like the all-out comic relief farce character," and it really wasn't. Like, he was a character. Like, he was sensible. He played it well, and that might be testament to Josh Gad. That might be testament to Kenneth Branagh's direction of his performance to get it out of him. But no, I mean, Kenneth Branagh's been doing this for a while now. He's great at what he does, whether it be acting, directing, or both, and that's the case with this movie.
Okay. So it made you like Josh Gad?
Yes.
I
didn't expect it.
He's acquired taste, to say the least.
And there's a moment in this film where he falls into a mound of snow as well, and it just made me have really bad flashbacks of Frozen and his character of Olaf.
Hey, it wasn't that bad.
I'm trying to think what else I can talk about this film in spoiler-free. I think I've pretty much covered everything. If I'm going to go into overall recommendation, I might go into spoilers in just a little bit. I would definitely recommend this film. I can imagine this film won't be to everyone's taste, and this film, from the trailers, it does make it look a lot more action-packed than it actually is. Go into it willing to know that it is a murder mystery. It's very much, this is this one location. You're going to have evidence. You're going to have mystery. You're going to have misdirection. It's going to be everything you pretty much can take away from any film that's a murder mystery in this regard. For the most part, it's played very straight, but it's still a fun and an enjoyable time at the cinema. Interestingly, though, it was a fairly decent-sized crowd, and I was probably the youngest there by 30 or more years, which is it's an interesting insight to see the target audience of this, because obviously old-time people are going to remember the old ones. They're going to remember either reading the book or seeing these different incarnations. I'm not sure how much of a draw it's going to be for new people, though.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask. Does it feel like like it is catering to a more younger audience, or does it feel really like it wants to get the guys, the people that grew up or saw the original? Does it feel like it wants to get them in seats more than, say, like teenagers?
Because that's the interesting thing, because my parents love the original Murder on the Orient Express, and they've seen countless versions of it across the time. They love the 70s version as well. So I showed them the trailer for this, and I will agree that the trailer is abysmal for this film. They could have easily put together a better trailer, but they saw that trailer and immediately they said, I don't like it. I don't like the modern style they're going with. Well, it's still set in the 30s, but in terms of the aesthetic and the style of it, they didn't like it. They didn't take to it at all. Now I've said that I really enjoyed the film, they've sort of like questioned it and might go and see it. I think for older fans, for older people, it was the curiosity of seeing another version. Maybe they like Kenneth Branagh and it has that draw there. For modern audiences, I would say it's going to be the star power. But then again, if you're looking at sort of like up-and-coming actors or fairly new actors, really the only two you've got in there are Josh Gad and Daisy Ridley. They're the newcomers, really. Everyone else are big household names. Johnny Depp, maybe you could argue. But I mean, his start. You look at Pirates of the Caribbean, for example, the latest one that came out, and most people would argue that the film's okay, but it's certainly not down to Johnny Depp. People are kind of over him at this point. He doesn't turn in a bad performance at all. I really liked how he played the character in this, but it's going to be an interesting one to see how much this one does. It hasn't really got much competition. I think next week Paddington 2 comes out, and then the week after that Justice League comes out, so that might take the shine away from it. But I hope people do go and see this. It's just going to be how accessible a 2-hour murder mystery film is to today's audiences that maybe want that action. And there are some moments in this film where they do skirt towards that, but it's not really much more than a short pursuit across the train tracks or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
There was one other thing I was going to say. Oh, yes. I was watching this and I was really enjoying it, and it got to the end and I was thinking they could potentially turn this into a series. I mean, there are countless Poirot novels out there they could do. And I was thinking I could see Kenneth Branagh coming back directing another one, or even just starring in another one and making a series out of these things. And without going into specifics until the spoiler section, they do tease a next one at the end of the film that they could do. If this is the only one, it still works because it's kind of like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge to the expanded history of the Poirot character. But if it gears up for a sequel, then I'm absolutely down, as long as Kenneth Branagh comes back, because I liked what he put into it in terms of the direction, and I think it really worked. So that'll do it for spoiler free. I kind of feel bad now, because did you have any inkling to see this film at all?
Yes.
And you know nothing about it?
And I know nothing about it.
I probably won't be able to do a spoiler section then. I'm going to keep this as cryptic as I can, so I don't give anything away.
Okay.
Okay. The ending of the film and who is revealed to be the killer, I was concerned that Kenneth Branagh would change the source material and the outcome to be something new. He doesn't. He keeps it very close to the original source material. He injects new things into it at the beginning, like the introduction of Poirot when he's in Jerusalem. But in terms of the actual narrative of Murder on the Orient Express, it's very close to it. The outcome at the end is the same. And the ending monologue that Poirot gives when his entire sort of like morals on the justice system is questioned is really moving and is really nice. And that's along with Patrick Doyle's score as well. It's a beautiful moment and ties everything together. I can't say who sings the final song now, because that might give something away in terms of...
Would it help if I did this?
Okay, yes, this is good. Okay, so major spoiler alert right now for Murder on the Orient Express. If you haven't seen the movie and you want to see it, click off this review right now, because I'm going to go into film-breaking spoilers. So it turns out at the end, like in the source material, that all of them are behind it. Every single person in the film is the killer, essentially. Like, each one took turns in stabbing the character of Johnny Depp, who is the guy that dies in this movie. The credit song is sung by Michelle Pfeiffer, and I instantly recognized the voice. I recognized her from Prince of Egypt, the animated film from the 90s. I recognized her voice there. And it's a beautiful song. I can't remember what it's called, though. It's the final track of the soundtrack. So I was glad that Kenneth Branagh was able to keep it in line with the novel and didn't divert from it. Yeah, no, I thought that was a good choice, and it paid homage to that original source material and did it justice. You can put the headphones back on now, Tom. Tom, are you still there? We're good.
Okay.
We're good. I gave you a thumbs up. We're good. What I will say as well, this isn't spoilers, but for the staging at the end, when he kind of sits everyone down and is about to announce who the killer is, in the original, they kind of just sit inside the train in the round, and then Poirot's in the middle, just sort of like going up to everyone. This one, they do it a bit more cinematically. He has them all sit outside on the train track to the tunnel in the cold with all the snow falling, and has them all lined up at a table. Kind of a weird choice, in all honesty, but I like what it did with it. Can I go into the tease? You know of the other Agatha Christie novels, though, right? The other main Poirot story.
Yeah, I know of them.
You know of the one that's set in Egypt, right?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Can I talk about just like where they might leave it off for that one? Is that okay?
Sure, that's
okay. Okay, so after the film's all said and done, he gets back to the train station and he's walking, and a guy comes up to him and says, "Excuse me, Hercule Poirot, there's been another murder." And he goes, "Oh, I'm not Poirot, I'm just on holiday right now." And he says, "You need to come to Egypt immediately." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And he says, like, "There's been a murder on the Nile," or something like that. And then he goes, "Okay, take me to the car." And then the final shot is him getting into the car and it drives off. It skirts very close to a moment like from Battle of the Five Armies, which I always link back to. It's like, "Go north. There is a ranger there. You must meet him. His father, Arathorn, is a great man."
Yeah.
It was kind of a moment like that, but I was expecting it. I was watching and thinking like they could easily do Death on the Nile. And when they said that, I did chuckle and went like, "Oh, okay, so if they do end it on this one, it's a nice little nod to the other novels." If they do continue it, actually though, if they do continue it, because he says there's been a murder, you have to come to Egypt. But the whole premise of Death on the Nile is kind of another situation as Murder on the Orient Express. He just happens to be in Egypt as the murder actually takes place, and he works it from there. With the murder already taking place, which prompts him to go to Egypt, I'm not sure how that's going to work. Maybe they'll retcon it if they do another one, and there has been a murder there, but it's like a nice little cold open, which gets him to Egypt, and then the main murder takes place. Not really sure how they'll do it. Final thoughts. I really enjoyed this movie. I'm not really sure how I'd rank it in terms of my favorite films of the year. I would like to see it again, though. I did like the style of it. I did like the direction. I liked all the performances, and the music was great. The second act might drag for some people that are expecting a bit more action beats in it based on the trailer and more of that stylistic flair. But I think that Kenneth Branagh did a great job. He adapted it very well. He kept it very close for the most part. And it shows a lot of respect for that source material and all the other incarnations. And I'd like to see Kenneth Branagh come back and play the character of Poirot again. So that'll do it for my review on Murder on the Orient Express. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know what you thought of this film. I don't know if this is out in the US just yet. It might be out next week. I haven't seen any US reviews on it just yet. But if you have seen the movie in the UK, do let me know what you thought of it. Which other versions did you like? Which is your favorite incarnation of Poirot? Anything related to Poirot or Murder on the Orient Express, please do let me know. Thank you very much, Tom, for sitting on with me for this one and asking me questions. I know it was very... You saw the trailer and that was pretty much it. But no, it just gives me someone to bounce off so that I'm not awkward on camera alone. So thank you very much for that. A lot of stuff still coming to the channel. There'll be more movie reviews as we get through these last couple of months of 2017, and we'll eventually move into Oscar season. There'll be more trailer reactions from me as well. So please hit that subscribe button, share, spread the word, all that good stuff. And until the next video, we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.